Hello, this is Simon Kensington from Kensington Link Building, and I'm just going to have a quick run through of a local business site in the Northampton area. It's a fencing company, and I just want to look at the site and see how we could improve the on-page so that this website would rank better in Google, and through ranking better generate more leads and inquiries for this business. Now at the moment, the company that I've chosen here, completely at random, it's on page 2 for the keyword fencing services Northampton, and so I'm just going to have a look at this site and see over the next sort of 10 or 15 minutes what they could do to improve it. I've done a little bit of research into the keywords and a little bit of research into the Google My Business, and I've also done a little bit of competitive analysis to see what other pages are ranking for other companies. So let's crack on. So the first thing I like to look at when looking at a site is kind of the look and the feel. Does it give off trust signals? Because if you've got a site that doesn't look trustworthy, then it's going to be harder to encourage people to do whatever you want them to do, whether it's to, in this case, make a phone call, or whether it's to fill in a form, or whether it's to purchase directly. So the first thing we can see here is that the site has got an HTTPS, although it's not got a green padlock, but that may just be the browser setting that I've got here incognito. But it has an HTTPS, which is a good ranking signal, and it has a telephone number, some pictures, but aside from that, doesn't really offer any other kind of trust signals. There's no marks for local business bureaus. There's no kind of checker trade. There's no any of the kind of business chamber type links that you might expect. So adding those sorts of links, or the badges, the certificates that you get from being associated in that, would add some trust factors to this page. Now I notice this page is made by Yale, so they're kind of cheap and cheerful sites that are put up, but you know that even so, there's a lot of sites that kind of come out of the bag looking like this. So there's things that we can do here that will help other sites. So in terms of looking at the keyword research, I have gone through and looked at Google Keyword Planner, and I've put in the two terms, the three terms: fencing services, fencing contractors, and I can see that I've got a number of keywords come back from the Keyword Planner. As you can see, there's 1,333 here. I think the two relevant ones here are fencing contractors and fencing services. Now, this one has a bid price, which means that people are paying around about 50 pence per click for the ads that you see on the side of the page. So at the top here, if we had any ads, then they'd be paying around about 50 pence for those clicks. So looking at the commercial intent, that suggests that people who are bidding on these keywords believe that fencing contractors is a better keyword than fencing services. Now I tend to agree with that, simply because when you look at the Google My Business, which is the free listing that any business can complete, then we see that the primary category for fencing services is actually fencing contractor. So fencing contractor is what Google believes is the most relevant term for fencing services. As you can see, fencing services. So one of the tips that you can use to help rank better is to make sure that your website is in alignment with the Google My Business primary categories. So if you've got a Google My Business listing and your primary category, which is here, is fencing contractor, and if you add fencing contractor to your website, then Google's going to be able to make that that link much more easily, and in turn will probably rank you higher than those that don't have that in their on their page somewhere. So when we look at our Bell fencing services, we can see that they don't have fencing contractor on here. So that's one of the things that I would do. Now this is, interestingly, this is the top ranking page for fencing contractors, and they've got a lot more content on their page, a lot more links, they've got reviews, they've got generally a site that looks a bit dated, but it's got a lot more content on it. You can see on the bottom of their page here they've got their address, which makes it nice and easy. It doesn't look as if they're hiding anything. You can see up here that they've got their page titles, Northampton Fencing Services, so they've got their keywords in there. So it's probably one of the reasons that's helping them to rank higher in Google. Whereas we come back to our target site here, it's kind of fairly plain and a bit simplistic in contrast to that. So I'm looking at the on-page details for our Bell fencing service, and we can see here that the main target here is fence panels, pergolas, steel fencing in Northampton. Now that's quite a mix of things. So we're looking at fence panels and pergolas and steel fencing. Now those, in my mind from experience, those are probably too different to things to be lumped in on the same page. Google's going to be sitting there thinking, well, is this page about fence panels? Is it about pergolas, which is arguably nothing to do with fences other than made from wood, generally speaking, and steel fencing? How does that fit in with kind of fence panels and things? So these are probably deserving of their own pages rather than being all kind of lumped in on one. Google likes to have things kind of laid out for it, and the simpler you can make Google's life, the better, and you get rewarded with higher rankings. So when we look at the H2s and the H3s, we see that there isn't anything in the in these heading tags that would give Google the idea that this is wanting to be ranked for fencing services, or even fencing contractor, which is seemingly the keyword phrase with the most commercial intent. We look at the word count. We've only got 274 words, so that's not particularly good. The title has got the fencing services, but it's part of the brand name, obviously. So this is reasonably well optimized, but I think if we were looking at fencing services or contractors, then we could probably make this a bit more specific for fencing services, fencing contractors in Northampton. Now the meta description here, which is the bit that shows up in the snippet in Google, this you can control by putting the right code on the page. If you don't put the right code, Google will just pull a snippet out at random, what it thinks. Now, if you add the keyword into the meta description, you'll find that you'll get more consistent rankings. So it would be a good idea to put in fencing services, fencing contractors in here as well. So they're a reasonable length, but we would just want to put in the keyword in there so that it makes it easier for Google to understand what the page is about. So in terms of the site's strength and authority, it really isn't up to much. Traffic wise, it's probably not getting a great deal. It's ranking for fencing Northampton, concrete posts at 49 and timber supplies 98. So it's certainly not on page 1, and here we're talking about page 4, 5 and even higher on here. So in terms of being found on Google, this website is failing big time in terms of generating any kind of reasonable amount of phone calls or inquiries for this company. And all that could be changed just by adding some more information onto the pages, restructuring the website, and generally making it more Google friendly. And they didn't take an awful lot of time or experience to do that. In terms of ranking factors, the things that Google likes best, there are 3 or 4 of them. There is the page title, and that's the bit up here. That needs to have your keyword phrase in it. Then you've got your what's called the H1, your first heading tag, which is usually on the top of the page here. And then you've got H2s or H3s, which are the smaller headings. And those usually you want to put a variation of your keyword in there. And then you want to make sure that you have your main keywords in the first paragraph and the last paragraph. And you also want to make sure that you've got plenty of content on the page to describe what that service is. So probably if we're looking at garden and security fencing, you'll probably find that these are actually 2 different target groups. People might be looking for garden fencing, and then other people might be looking for security fencing. So it would probably be a good idea to create 2 pages. So we've got one page that targets garden fencing, and then another one that targets security fencing. And then we can label up those pages appropriately so that there's no confusion at all, so that when Google's thinking about where to put that page, it knows, well, this page is all about garden fencing. The page titles mentions garden fencing. The H1 tag mentions garden fencing. The H2 tags mention variations of those. The content is about garden fencing. And so that's the sorts of things that you want to be looking at when you're putting together a page and wanting to get it ranked in Google. Now, I've done some analysis with a tool that I've got, and I've looked at using the keyword phrase here, fencing services in Northampton. Now, this has pulled out a number of variations, and if you recall, I mentioned about putting these variations in places like your H2, H3, H4 tags and within your content. These are the sorts of words that you should be having in your content for this keyword. So including words like fencing contractors, Northampton fencing services, Northampton fencing services, fencing company. These are the phrases, the words that Google likes to see and are relevant to this keyword. So these are the sorts of things that we need to be putting on our page. Now that's in part come from some analysis of the top ranking sites that I've pulled out here. These are local business competitors, and this has given us a page score of 47%, which is not very good at all. So if we wanted to improve this page, then there are some recommendations that we can do here. So we ought to put our keyword, if we can, in the main URL. We want to put it in the page title. We want to make sure that it's in the H1 tag. Now from our analysis, the rest of these are okay. For the variations, it seems that we're over-optimized for the variations. So we need to look at how we can perhaps remove some of these references where we are talking about these more than we're talking about our keywords. So the things that I would do is look at going through some of these and making sure that I am not over-optimized and not under-optimized as we are here. So those are some of the things that I would look at. I would also look at adding some more words to the page. The average target count here is just under 400, so we can put a good deal more relevant content on our page to help to boost the relevancy of our page. And I did another analysis here of the go back to this one, fencing contractor. Now fencing contractors ironically optimized a little bit better, but again we are under optimized in those key areas, and for the variations we're over optimized in these words here. So these are some of the things that I would look at in terms of trying to get this page ranking better. The other big issue is that this site doesn't have a Google My Business listing. Now Google My Business is free to set up and it's relatively straightforward to go through, but it is important that you fill it out properly and you make the correct links between your Google My Business and your website. But the important thing to bear in mind is that the maps listings account for about 33% of clicks on a page. So if you're going to be in the top 3 here, you're going to get a third of all of the clicks. Now about 10% of the clicks will go to any adverts, and then the rest will go to the first 2 or 3 results down here. So as you can see, being up here is a huge benefit to your company, and so optimizing your Google My Business listing is vital to getting clicks. So that's another recommendation that I would make for our business here, is to improve the content on the page using some of the tips that we've gone through, and also creating a Google My Business listing for this so that they can start to have a shot at ranking up here and getting the lion's share of the clicks, which will generate more inquiries for the business. So I hope you found that useful. My name's Simon Kensington-Fellows from Kensington Link Building. Many thanks.